Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk a little bit about nephritic and nephrotic syndromes, but what we're going to focus on in this video is nephrotic syndromes, and then in the next video we're going to talk about nephritic syndromes because there's a lot. They all look kind of identical, and I just want to give you the breakdown of how I go through, like, for example, a test question on the USMLE Step 1 or Step 2, and how do I delineate between the two and kind of go through it. Disclaimer, I'm not always the greatest renal student, but I thought this was pretty helpful for myself, so why not share it? So when you want to distinguish the two, you want to look at the protein in the urine. If there is a lot of protein in the urine, so massive proteinuria, that is anything over 3.5 grams per day. If that is the case for the patient, if you look at the labs and it says, oh, they have 3.7 grams per day in their urine when you take the urine sample and you do the urinalysis, that's a nephrotic syndrome. On top of that, that's not the only thing that nephrotic syndromes will present with. They may have hypoalbuminemia, so meaning that there's a loss of albumin. And if you know anything about albumin, it's that it's really good at retaining water and making sure that we don't have edema. So you're going to get these really puffy eyes, so that's a periorbital edema, and then the peripheral edema, so swelling around the joints, particularly in the lower extremities, like pitting edema. So if you push your finger on someone's shin and it goes down way too far, that's pitting edema. Excuse me. You also get loss of immunoglobulin, so that's going to increase the risk of infections. So the patient might come off presenting with, oh, I've had like 3 infections in the last few days or last few weeks or months or whatever it may be. Not only that, they're also compounded by the fact that they have hyperlipidemia, so there's a higher chance of thrombotic events like an MI or critical limb ischemia. Also, they have a hypercoagulable state because they are also losing antithrombin 3. This is kind of similar to the way that heparin would work. So they not only have a lot of lipids, meaning a lot of cholesterol and a lot of risk for any kind of atherosclerotic event, and they'll have a hypercoagulable state, meaning that they have any chance of actually getting a severe blood clot, DVT, pulmonary embolism, you name it. They will also have, due to this massive proteinuria, frothy urine, as well as fatty casts. And so the big thing with the fatty casts, and what you may be asked about on an exam, is that they are associated with the Maltese cross sign. So let's say you get a question, and then on the attachment, or you're just looking at the urinalysis and the lab sends this back, and you see this really weird, almost cross-like with a diamond in the center. Sometimes they'll just look like this. This is a Maltese cross sign, and you know that you're looking at a fatty cast inside the patient's urine, which is nephrotic syndrome. And then I did say that this was a nephrotic video, but not a nephritic video, so the nephritic video will come after this. But I just wanted to make sure that you guys know what the difference are between the two so that we can go through them. Nephritic is anything under 3.5 grams per day. So they may have a normal amount of protein in the urine or no protein at all. Um, but anything below that, that's where you're starting to get into the nephritic syndromes. So this is also going to present with red blood cell casts in the urine plus hematuria. This is blood in the urine. You're going to see hypocellular glomeruli that may or may not be inflamed. So here's a normal glomulurus. This is a very hypercellular, very inflamed glomerular apparatus. You're also going to see azotemia, which is just an elevated serum BUN and creatinine. You may see an elevated ratio of this. You're also going to see that the patient is not going to the bathroom enough, so they may be complaining about the fact that they cannot go to the bathroom, or when they do go to the bathroom, it just doesn't seem like enough urine. Um, and there may also be hypertension. So if you check their vital signs, you're going to see that they do have an elevated systolic, diastolic, and that is because in a nephritic syndrome, you're going to get a lot of salt retention. So that's the last thing we're going to say about this in this video, but we're going to go through all the ones for the nephrotic syndrome. So there's a ton of them, and I included this video of this poor doctor right here. She is obviously very stressed out. This is how I felt when I was learning this. It was just a lot. It's a lot to go through. And the best thing I found is to just look at the labs. So you look at the light microscopy, the immunofluorescence, the electron microscopy. When you delineate the cause, so the first thing you want to do is, do they have a lot of protein in their urine? If they do, you're looking at nephrotic syndrome. If they don't, you're probably looking at a nephritic syndrome. But that's not the end all be all, right? Because there's like a million other things that the nephrotic and the nephritic syndromes have. So the best thing to do is to not only look at this, it's also to look at the light microscopy, IF, and an EM. So I'm going to put them just as LM, IF, EM. And so once you've delineated between those, you can also look at the cause. So the cause is a really good clue as to what's going on. So like for instance, focal segmental is HIV, right? but the other ones may be diabetic in nature, right? So we're going to go through these. The first one we always start out with, and the one that we started out with the nephrologist, was that minimal change disease nephrotic syndrome. So this is the most common cause of nephrotic syndrome in children, and is also often idiopathic, meaning that we just don't know where it comes from. But it can be triggered by a recent infection. Maybe the child's been immunized to a disease pretty recently that could also trigger it. But what really happens is you're going to lose the charge barrier on the glomerular basement membrane. And so you're going to get what we call selective proteinuria, where only albumin is leaking out, but you're not losing any immunoglobulin, right? This will have an excellent response to corticosteroids. So usually when I reference steroids and immunosuppression in this video, just know that we're talking about anything like oral prednisone or prednisolone by mouth, so PO daily, or cyclophosphamide for relapses. So usually minimal change disease is the one that you can just give a daily regimen of prednisone or prednisolone, whatever corticosteroid you'd like to use, or cyclophosphamide for relapses. More often than not in minimal change disease, you don't really need it. And then you're going to see normal glomeruli. It's going to look like nothing really is going on there. On IF, you're not going to find anything either. But what you're really going to find on electron microscopy is the effacement of podocyte foot processes. And so what does that even mean, right? Well, if you look at the top is a normal glomerular basement membrane, and all of these FP are your foot processes. And you can see that they have a nice space. This is the foot processes on the top. This one's a little larger, but that's okay. And you're going to see these little areas between them. This is how the glomerular basement membrane between the foot processes of the podocytes will maintain that selective charge barrier. There is now a loss of that. So now you come in and you're now seeing this effacement. So meaning that these guys are basically squished down and there's almost a stopgap between the glomerular basement membrane and the outside interstitium, right? So you're getting some of it, but not all of it, right? So they're not this, clean little foot processes. They're being effaced. So basically, just imagine this giant, if you can look at my cursor, pushing them down all the way, and then they're just kind of flattening out on the basement membrane. And this is a very severe one. This is membranous nephropathy, which we'll also talk about, which you can see is just wreaking havoc all over the glomerular basement membrane. But you can also see that in this one, the glomerular basement membrane looks relatively okay, other than the fact that you have the effacement of the foot processes. Now in focal segmental glomerular sclerosis, this is basically a step up from minimal change disease, and it's often seen as a almost progression. Sometimes it's thought of as a progression from minimal change disease to this. So if you don't get those oral corticosteroids like prednisolone and prednisone out fast enough, or maybe it's just not caught right away, this may actually be the step up. But sometimes this just comes out of nowhere itself. So if it is not idiopathic, then it is likely due to a couple things: HIV infections, sickle cell disease, heroin abuse, and massive obesity. And this is the most common cause of nephrotic syndromes in Hispanic communities and African American populations. It is also inconsistent, has a often poor response to steroids and immunosuppression. So think of your like cyclophosphamides, your prednisolones, prednisones. On light microscopy, you're going to see segmental sclerosis, which kind of gives away the name, the focal segmental, meaning only a portion of the glomeruli will actually be affected by this. And the sclerosis, you're going to actually see sclerosis and hyalinosis. So remember the hyaline membrane. On IF, it's actually going to be negative, but sometimes you may see the non-specific deposits of say C3, C1, and IgM. On electron microscopy, you're going to see also that effacement of foot processes. So this is similar to minimal change disease, but the way that you can delineate the two is the cause and your light microscopy. So on light microscopy for minimal change disease, remember, it was normal. Here, you got segmental sclerosis and hyalinosis. And so here's a good graph that I found on Renal Fellow Network. It's very good, by the way. Basically showing you these nice little foot processes, and now they're getting this effacement. So now you're seeing this little spikes, and now they're almost being squished out. In focal segmental, you're also getting this hyalinosis and mesangial expansion. And then here's a picture of it. And so you can see here that this right here is normal. This right here is clearly not. And so here's that hyalinosis and expansion that we were talking about before. And you can see that is only part of the glomeruli that is affected. And again, credit to Renal Fellow Network. This was a great way to find out, the pathology imaging. It's a very good resource. Recommend everybody check it out. Drop the link in the description below. And membranous nephropathy, this is another step up. They progressively get worse. This is the most common cause of nephrotic syndrome in Caucasian adults. It also has a poor response to steroids and immunosuppression. In light microscopy, you're going to see diffuse capillary and glomerular basement thickening. So you can see that this glomeruli is very thick. It has very very few spacing between all of the intricacies of the glomeruli. You're also going to see on immunofluorescence, which is down here, is very granular deposits, which is just from immune complexes. So this is obviously most often from something that is autoimmune in nature. And so I think you can somewhat appreciate, so if you can see where my cursor is and look below, right here you can see there's almost granular like dotted processes around the glomeruli. And then on EM, you're going to see subepithelial deposits. The big one and a key word that you're always going to see on an exam is spike and dome appearance. So here's your spike and here's that dome. And it is subepithelial. That starts to matter once you get into the nephritic syndromes as well. But just know with membranous nephropathy, this is the spike, and then you're going to get this subepithelial deposit, and that's the dome. In amyloidosis, remember there's just a billion things that can go on with someone that is suffering from anything that results in an increase in amyloid. This will almost always cause some issue with the kidney. And the big thing is amyloidosis nephropathy. So if they're suffering from any condition, just know that the kidney is most commonly involved. And the one thing that I can tell you from experience from my in-house exams in like UWorld is that light microscopy, Congo red staining, apple green bifurcations, and the mesangium. And so you're going to see this, it's just giant cells, like right. So this is the mesangium, and you can see that this was stained with the Congo red staining, and then when put onto the polarized light, you're going to see that apple green bifurcations. And diabetic glomerular nephropathy, this is the most common cause of end-stage renal disease in the United States. And this is why diabetes is such a horrifying disease, because it is a slow progression and a slow march towards worsening conditions. The hyperglycemia of diabetes can cause basically non-enzymatic glycosylation, so that's the NEG, inside the kidneys. This most often affects the glomerular basement membrane, the arterioles, so it's going to cause a thickening of that, and it's going to cause a thickening on the glomerular basement membrane and increase its permeability, which obviously is not a good thing because you want it to make sure that it's filtering the correct way. So if it's filtering too little, aka increased permeability, you're not getting enough of those ions and enough of the BUN and creatinine that you should in and out, and it's going to cause all sorts of electrolyte abnormalities. And so the big one, and I think the only one that really truly matters on this one, is light microscopy. This is my honest opinion. Mesangial expansion, glomerular basement thickening, but that sounds like a lot of them, right? The big one is these Kemmelstein-Wilson nodules. So they're very eosinophilic, they're very pink, and so you're going to see this giant thing in the middle of this glomerular apparatus. And so they're just this giant pink, I don't even know, maybe glob I would put it as. But basically, if you see one of these on a exam attachment or you see it on a lab that pathology sent back to you, this is diabetic glomerular nephropathy until proven otherwise. I mean, I don't even know why I have to say until proven otherwise. This is almost a dead-on sign for it. So this is the rest of the video. This is all the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please leave a like, comment, and if you can, subscribe if you like the channel. And let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see anything else. Thank you guys and have a great day.